Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another fresh look at conversation. Thank you all for joining me, and thank you to those of you who are listening or watching the replay. So this morning I had a really interesting experience, and I thought what we could talk about today is a little bit around like what our body experiences and the relation to thought. So the example I had was that I woke up this morning nice and chilled, and both my daughters were still sleeping. Okay, then the one got up, it's great, and then the other one stayed in bed. And normally she's up at like 7 o'clock on the dot. And when I looked at the clock, it was 8:30. I was like, oh my goodness, that's amazing. She's had such a great lie-in. Wow, that's great. And then I suddenly thought, oh my God, it's 8:30. What if there's something wrong with her? What if something awful has happened? What if she's died? Like, and don't even ask me where that came from. But within like literally a second, I was like, oh my God, how will I let these guys know? What will I do? How will I react? Blah, 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 blah. And I felt physically sick and shaky, and like something awful had happened, and I knew it hadn't. And I noticed that, and I got interested about it, and obviously it went away. And like literally 30 seconds after I thought that, she got up anyway. But so she's fine. But it was just really interesting. Like, that was such a physical reaction to clearly nothing real, like nothing real. And I was wondering if we can talk about that, because how did that happen?
I think, Bron, that example sounds so much like it came from thought. So the way you described it, that, you know, when you, 1 second you were kind of feeling fine, and then you had a thought about it being 8:30 and why wasn't your daughter up and what could have happened. And then as I see it at the moment, is that it's like you had a perceived stressor. There was stress on the body that was coming from your thinking that created such a physiological reaction. And that can be, I think there's a really interesting kind of contrast between a very real stressor and a perceived stressor, but as far as I can see at the moment, the physiological reaction, so the feelings that you get as a result of that, are the same. So whether whether you've got like a lion running after you and you're in immediate danger, or you've had a thought that something's happened to your daughter, one's real as a lion running after you is a real stressor, and one is a perceived stressor. One is you've kind of had a thought that something's wrong, and then you've had a physiological reaction to that. So you've sparked the stress response, and then that's created the feelings that you were experiencing.
Yeah, and I suppose that's what, as you're speaking, I'm thinking like, that's what anxiety is, isn't it? Is like, and that's why we feel anxious. Like now at the moment, I've got quite a few worries about like income and stuff like that. And it does, sometimes it's okay, but sometimes it feels like a real problem. And physically, I really, really feel it. But that's the thing, because I'm perceiving it as a real thing. So your body physiologically reacts to that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we can influence, or that's what we can see, that experience is always coming from the thinking. So you might, and I've been there too, that, if you're having kind of financial worries, we can get very caught up in the thinking about how are things going to pay out, how am I going to manage, and then have this kind of physiological reaction to that, to all that anxious thinking. But then we also have the capacity to kind of see that and clock it and let it go, and create space for something more helpful to come along that will help us tackle the same problem. So it's like we've got a challenge of okay, well, I've been there several times, like financial dire straits, and get caught up in lots of anxious thinking, which isn't serving me to solve the problem. And I'm experiencing all the kind of physiological reaction to that. But then when I clock it, I think, okay, well, just take a step back. What can I do? What what's going to come to me that's kind of more helpful to tackle this challenge. And then suddenly you start to have a different experience. You no longer feel under attack as you do when you're kind of caught up in anxious thinking.
It's so funny. I had that exact experience in the week. Like, I know a few of you know that I have this ongoing saga about income and jobs and stuff. And this week happened to be one where I fell into a massive hole about it. And money is an interesting one for me because intellectually I know that it's made up, but it looks so real. Like there's an amount of money in your bank account and you have a certain amount of outgoings, and the two things have to match up. It's really, really interesting. And I fell into this despair about what am I going to do, and it needs to be solved. And it's like I wasn't thinking that, but that's kind of what I was thinking in terms of how I was behaving, kind of thing. And it for me, it's a real sticky one. It looks so real. It looks like a lion, but clearly it's not. But yeah.
And it doesn't mean that it's not important. Like, it doesn't mean that you don't need to solve a problem. Just, I guess we're saying that perhaps you'll be a better problem solver from a place of clarity than a place of anxious thinking. At least that's what I've experienced. Like when I'm trying to solve the financial dire straits, I'm no good when I'm caught up in the anxious thinking, and I just feel very panicky and, you know, overwhelmed. I'm not gonna get a good idea of how to get out of the hole from that place. So I think it's helpful to recognize that experience is coming from the thinking that I'm giving attention to about the problem that I've got, the challenge that I've got, and that anxious thinking is not going to provide the answer necessarily. At least it hasn't in my case.
So what, like I can see that with that kind of thinking. Is there any time that any of us can think of when, so like, is there any time when it is coming from the outside? So like in my head, if, I don't know, like if I hurt myself, or like, okay, so I'm a physiotherapist, right? And my understanding is that information comes in through our 7 sensory systems, all right, which are 5 that we all know, and then we've got movement and body awareness. And this is how I explain it to parents of children. So information comes in, all these senses, the body's got to take it all in, it goes up to the brain then processes it and makes sense of it and sends a reaction if needed. So the reaction might be that you dismiss it. So like most of us can filter out the things that we don't need to see or hear or pay attention to, like the fact that we're sitting on chairs. It's happening to all of us, but until I actually said it, probably nobody actually thought about it, but we were still doing it. So maybe that's it. So the only way we were aware of it was when we thought about it. Okay, anyway, so going down that thing is like, so if all the stuff comes in and then you get a reaction, I haven't necessarily thought about it. Like that whole putting your hand on a hot stove, that's one everybody uses a lot, isn't it? Like if you put your hand on a hot stove, immediately you'll take it off. That doesn't look to me like there's any thought in that.
How do you know to take your hand away?
Because the brain has, because of the reflex system, because of biology, because of physiology, like the nervous system has taken over and reacted. But then I know as well that, like, if I've cut myself or my daughter yesterday, she cut herself, and until she saw it was bleeding, didn't actually hurt her. And I wonder if that's because we've all, I've heard of stories of people breaking their legs or breaking something and not even necessarily knowing, if they've been in a fight or flight situation where they've been really hurt. and they manage to carry on to get themselves to relative safety, and only then they've noticed that they've been injured themselves or they've been hurt. So I suppose there, like, maybe there is a sort of an awareness element of it. Like, I've had back problems before, and sometimes it feels okay and sometimes it doesn't.
I'm also thinking about, I remember when my son was really little and he used to get shampoo in his eyes or something in his eye. And he would freak out, literally freak out. And I would say, it's okay, it's going to be gone in a minute. It hurts for a little bit and then it'll be gone in a minute. And then suddenly I noticed, when he was like 3, he got used to it and he'd get shampoo in his eye and he wouldn't even freak out. Just be like, Mum, I've got shampoo in my eye, and he'd sort of wait for it to stop hurting. But maybe just that knowing, the thought was it's going to go away, and then he didn't get stuck in that, oh my God, it's going to be like that forever thought. I don't know if there's something in that. But because I think when he was little, he just thought it was going to be painful. That sharp pain when you get shampoo in your eye. But as adults, it happens to us and we just go, oh, I've got shampoo in my eye. But as a kid, it's the worst thing ever because you feel like you're going to go blind. I don't know if there's something in that, just the thought of like, it'll be okay, and it is okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'm thinking about like little ones. Yesterday up at the school, a little one, she's only a year, she's only just started walking, and she took a tumble and bonked her head. And you could see that minute where it was like, am I cry, am I not? And I pulled a funny face at her, and she decided to laugh. She didn't cry. And you can do that sometimes, can't you? You can really distract. And the distraction is the thinking.
What we talk about as thought is kind of our awareness, our consciousness. It's the part of our experience that we pay attention to. And just like you said, in our bodies, there are loads of things going on all the time, automatically: digestion, breathing, heart pumping blood around the body. And you're not aware of those things most of the time, but if you direct your attention onto them, then you can see them. And so I guess the way I would think about it is like, if you injure yourself in some way and you get a registration of the pain, that's an awareness piece. But there's a layer of what we might call thinking, which is about the interpretation of that pain. What does that pain really mean? Do we think of it like shampoo in the eyes and we know it's going to kind of fade shortly? Or do we think this is, sign that we've got an autoimmune disease like RA or something, and that's going to kind of limit our life mobility? All of those things are the thinking layer that we add on to kind of the experience that surfaces as we go about our lives. I think that's the way I make sense of it at the moment. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, I'm like so on that, how the way you feel, whether it's pain or hunger, it's so much like, I'm the kind of person who, I see someone, I mean, like the people say, oh, it's the blood, da, da, da. It's not the blood. It's if I see that you're in pain, I physically feel sick. And if, I cut myself, I see it, I'm like, oh shit, da, da, da. And then someone sees it and tells me, oh my God, that's bad, I faint, this kind of thing. So that's really like, it's just in my head, how until someone told me it's really bad, I was fine. And then I fainted and we had to call an ambulance, not for my finger, but because I fainted. And, like, or if I'm hungry, if I'm busy, working on an interesting project, I can go the whole day. I won't even think about it. But yet, if I 10 o'clock, I think, oh my God, I didn't have a snack. I don't have a snack. There is no food. I feel sick. That I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to die. And that's why my husband always has a snack in his pocket, because I'm a 5-year-old. And no, but because he knows I get really, really bad. And I feel like my body is all empty. I need to, and it's like really like serious because I think about it. And I really see that all the time, how, yeah, if I think about things, they become real. And now I feel understanding that I used recently the 3P in that situation where my husband cut his finger and it was blood dripping everywhere. We went to the hospital and I was like, I felt, when you start to feel you're changing color, the blood is leaving your head and you're about to faint. I felt that coming. I was like, look, Sandrine, I knew it was just a thought that was coming. So I was like, look, I was actually talking to myself, like, it's not helpful. We're not going to get to the hospital. They're going to be annoying because then we'll have to look after you and not him. And you're going to become the emergency. Anyway, and I took myself out of it and I could see, felt it living. And then I looked a bit, it was with the nurse and I saw the bit of finger missing. And it started coming back. I was like, don't go there. You don't have to go there. Let's have a walk. And I managed to manage it. Where, I go visit friends at the hospital, I'm the one fainting and the nurse gave me what they meant to give to the patient because it's all in my head. And it was really cool to be able, like it was during the lockdown, to actually play with it. Because I was like, oh my God, I could control it. And that was really, really cool. I could just see that as a thought. When it's super real, I faint. It's like, it's a physical thing that you feel like, well, and I thought that was how I was. My mom was like that, so I was like, yeah, I'm gonna live with that. And now I feel like, oh my God, I'm okay. I mean, gentle, but yeah, it's very much.
About 4 years ago, I had a lot of dental work. I had been neglecting my teeth for a very long time and I'd lost quite a lot of teeth. And part of the treatment was that I had a denture made, a plate as they call it, sort of made of plastic and wire, and it's got these little sort of things that look a bit like teeth, and it sits in the bottom of my mouth. And I got this thing, it cost a lot of money, and it fitted well, but I just couldn't cope with it being in my mouth. It was horrible. It was like I had something that just didn't belong there. And I tried it for about, I don't know, not for that long, but I just thought, I can't get on with this. And so I took it out and I put it in a box and I thought, I'll tackle this another time when I'm feeling more up to it. I know I've just got to kind of force myself through it. And this week, I was reminded that I'd never got round to that. And I thought about it and it just looked different. It looked, instead of it being something that I thought I just wasn't somebody who could cope with having the thing in their mouth and get used to it. It occurred to me that all that I was sort of, what if this was thought too, I suppose, is the kind of question Aaron would have asked. So I got it out and I put it in 2 days ago, and my initial thinking was that I would have it in for, like an hour a day and slowly increase it. But I had another thought, which was, well, just put it in and you can take it out when it starts to bother you. And I ended up having it in all day yesterday. And, you know, when I came down this morning, it occurred to me to put it in, and I'm wearing it now. And my experience of it is totally different. So it's very much a physical thing, because if I put my attention on it, it still feels kind of strange. And, you know, I still got an anticipation that when I'm eating, it will be kind of weird for a while. But all of that just doesn't feel like anything other than kind of stuff I'm giving attention to. You know, in a sense, I just recognize that it's how I'm looking at it, and I can see it differently. And my expectation is that I'll get to the point where I don't notice it at all, you know, 99% of the time. I don't know if that seems relevant to this conversation, but it occurred to me that it is.
It's brilliant. I love both of those stories. Both of them are just so, and it's like you said it there, it's what you pay your attention to. And I suppose that's why as well, like sometimes when my kids go outside, like yesterday it was pouring with rain again, and I could see they were cold. I kept saying, are you cold? Are you cold? No, we're fine. And then after they got bored, they noticed that actually they were cold, so they came inside. And it's what you pay attention to is what affects it. Like even going back to my story, I could have paid a lot more attention to that and like really panicked and gone in there and like, oh my God, are you okay? But I didn't, because I was like, well, I don't actually need to pay attention to that. Anyway, yeah, that's been really helpful for me. Anybody got anything else to say to that? What we've been talking about?
I feel like there's a sort of, I don't quite know how to say this, but like the physiological needs of a body. Like, for example, because if someone's watching this, and I can see that this is quite a sort of hard area to get to grips with in a way, because, I mean, you could say that if everything like hunger and cold and everything comes through thinking, like, I'm presuming that somebody with an eating disorder has the thought that they're hungry. They just are expert at ignoring that thought. And what I think it's kind of important to say that what we're also pointing to is the wisdom aspect of it. Like if you were out somewhere really cold, like the coldness would come to you through the thought, through your thinking, but it would be something to act on in terms of like getting into shelter or to put a better coat on or something. So it's like, even though it comes through thought, that's not the end of the story. There's the wisdom part too.
Yeah, I don't think we're saying to ignore whatever signal.
No, but I think it's quite hard for people sometimes to get to grips with the notion that like everything, like cold, for example, is coming at us through our thought, because it looks like it's external, because it looks like it's coming from the weather. So I think it can be quite tricky for people to appreciate that that's coming through thought, being experienced through thought.
I think that's a good one to practice with, actually, to like just trying, at the moment it's not that cold, but to play with it and try to notice when you know it's cold but you don't feel cold, because you don't feel, when you go, I don't know, from your house to the train station, if you're on the phone with someone, you might not realize it's cold until eventually you might think about your hand and you don't feel it anymore. So, and it's funny to just notice it, because you don't just think about the cold. So there is moments where you forget about that because, oh, you might be crossing the street and all of a sudden your attention is somewhere else.
Yeah.
But the cold is still there.
Yeah, it's not the cold, it's the experience of cold.
For me, the way, I was just going to say, for me, the way that kind of manifests with the weather is expectation. So I'll if I'm like walking to the station, like to use your example, Sandrine, and I am just like in my normal clothes and I feel cold, I'll really feel that cold and it will start to bother me. But if I'm you know, if I've just been to the gym and all I'm in is my sports clothes, which are like thin layers, and it's cold, I have the expectation when I leave, you know, the train, let's say, that when I'm on that walk back home, I have the expectation that I'm going to be really cold because I know that it's cold outside and I've got short sleeves on and no coat. But because I go in with that expectation, it doesn't affect me. Or I don't have the expectation that I'm going to be cold. It's that I know that I'm wearing the wrong clothes for it. So I just happen to be able to not feel it as much. Like, it doesn't affect me because that was the story that I was telling myself in my head, that there's this contrast of the weather versus my clothing. Whereas if I had been wrapped up and felt cold, I would have felt really angry about that. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's because I had just, I'd acknowledged that there was a mismatch. I then didn't feel, or maybe even embraced the breezy feeling on my arms, because that's what's supposed to happen when you go out in the cold without the right clothes on. And so it didn't affect me. I don't know if that makes sense.
I love that. This and this discrepancy between, yeah, your expectation and what is. I feel you can, I think we should do another half an hour because you can apply that to like so many other things. It's really cool. So I'm not going to start. I'll keep that for next week.
I think that's what Aaron calls adjusting for your thinking. So you have some habitual thinking, like he talks about how, you know, he used to get, he could play an instrument really well, but if he was in a live performance, then he couldn't, he would get all up in his head about all sorts of, you know, self-consciousness, and that would get in the way. But having realized the role that thought has, that some of that self-conscious thinking would come up, he talks about the idea of not necessarily that it goes away, but that you can adjust for it. That you kind of recognize, oh, that is what happens when I have that sort of thinking. And that seems to me, Shazia, to be kind of like what you're, a way of describing what you said, which is, you know, I recognize that I haven't got the appropriate clothing and my tendency would be, you know, to feel cold as a result. But because I notice that's the way my thinking goes, I'm in a way taking it less seriously. I'm adjusting for it. And it's something, you know, it's like a pattern I do, but I know it's just a pattern rather than I think it's significant.
And because you've just accepted, instead of trying to fight it and, oh my God, I don't want to be cold, I don't want to be cold, you just accepted that you're going to be cold. And that, okay, can I do a little short one? Yesterday, I met with a friend who, and it was so funny, and I loved what she said. And it was about that. Anyway, so she had a baby like 10 weeks ago or something. And she didn't live it well at all the first few weeks. And like, she was like, oh my God, that was just so awful. She really like, I was like, I can't do that. I'm like sleep deprived. It doesn't give me anything back. And like, she was really like, and it's so funny when she was telling me the story, she was like, one day, and she's not streepy, or she hasn't done, anyway. And she's like, one day I was like, oh, I'm just gonna accept that it's like that for now. I know it'll pass. And now she's fine. It's like, in a sense, like she's still sleep deprived and still, but she just accepted that that's how it is now. And she stopped fighting the situation, what she was experiencing. She just, yeah, okay, I can do that, and I'll do that until I need to do it. And that was so cool. And other like proof that we all have that wisdom. Whether you've done this repeat, she just figured out on her own that she just had to accept what was, which was really cool.
Brilliant. Thank you. That was fun. Thank you, everybody, for joining me and for having a conversation about that. I've had a few insights there. Yeah, and I look forward to, we shall be back next week and maybe we shall talk about the effect of expectation on our experience. Yeah, okay. Thanks a lot, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.